She woke up to the soft cry of her youngest child, the sound echoing through the small, worn-down apartment. The morning sun had barely touched the cracked walls, and the air was heavy with the smell of last night's dinner, or what little was left of it. She rubbed her eyes, feeling the soreness from a night spent half awake, half worrying. Her body ached, her back stiff from hours of bending over floors she had cleaned for the neighbors, scrubbing away stains that were never hers to begin with. Still, she forced herself out of bed, because there were mouths to feed, bills to pay, and a life that couldn't wait for rest. The apartment was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator, which had been making a strange noise for weeks. She glanced around the tiny kitchen. The cupboards were nearly empty. A box of stale crackers sat in the corner, and the small carton of milk had expired 2 days ago. She sighed, knowing she had nothing for breakfast, nothing for lunch, and almost certainly nothing for dinner. Her heart twisted as she thought about her children. She had promised them she would find a way, but promises were easy to make when hope existed. Right now, hope felt fragile, like it could shatter at any moment. She moved quickly to wake her older child, who was curled up on the small couch. The child blinked sleepily, rubbing their eyes, and asked quietly if there was any breakfast. She shook her head, forcing a small smile. "Not yet. I'll figure something out," she said, though her voice wavered. The child nodded, trusting her words as children always do, unaware of the weight on her shoulders. Finishing her morning routine, she left the apartment with the children bundled under her arm and her coat wrapped tightly around her. The streets were already busy, the cold air biting at her cheeks. Every step was a reminder of how hard life had become. She carried a small bag with a few clothes and some items she had collected for cleaning jobs. Each day was a struggle to find work that paid enough to cover rent, food, and small necessities. Some days she barely managed to earn enough for a loaf of bread. She walked past rows of elegant houses with manicured lawns and shiny cars parked in driveways. She could not help but glance at them, feeling a mix of awe and envy. This was a world she had never belonged to, a world that seemed untouchable. Yet today, something stirred inside her, a desperate spark that would not be silenced. She knew she could not wait any longer. Her children were hungry, and her options were running out. Turning down a quiet street, she noticed a massive house at the end. Its windows gleamed, and the front door looked like it belonged in a magazine. She had walked past it countless times, usually keeping her distance, embarrassed by the thought of stepping onto property that clearly did not welcome her kind. But today, hunger gave her courage. She approached the gate, her hand trembling slightly as she rang the bell. The sound of footsteps approached almost immediately. A man opened the door. He looked rich, sharp, and unapproachable. For a moment, she froze. She had imagined this moment 100 times in her mind, each scenario filled with polite refusals or outright shooing away. But she took a deep breath and spoke, her voice small but steady. I don't have any money for food. I can clean your house, if you give me something to eat." The man's eyes widened, and he froze, staring at her. There was a pause that seemed to stretch forever. She could feel her heartbeat in her chest, loud enough for her to be sure he could hear it too. She looked down at her shoes, hoping he wouldn't notice the shaking of her hands. She had never asked for anything like this before, never imagined she would have to. Yet here she was, standing at the threshold of a life so different from hers, hoping that kindness could exist in someone who clearly had everything. He studied her quietly. There was something in the way she spoke, something honest and raw that made him pause. It wasn't just desperation. It was pride, determination, and an unspoken dignity that she carried despite her circumstances. He could see it in the set of her shoulders, the way she looked at him without begging, the way her words trembled but did not break. She was different from the people he usually encountered, and that difference caught him off guard. She shifted her weight, unsure if she had overstepped. I just need something for my children," she added, her voice softer now, almost a whisper. "I can clean, I can cook, anything. I can't let them go hungry." The man remained silent, studying her face. memories stirred. Faces he hadn't seen in years, voices he hadn't heard in decades. Something about her, though simple and ordinary, triggered a recognition that made him pause in disbelief. He could not place it immediately, but a strange familiarity tugged at him, making him uneasy. Who was she, and why did he feel like he should know her? She waited, trying to keep her nerves from showing. Her stomach twisted with fear and anticipation. She had asked for help countless times in her life, and most times she had been turned away, told no in ways that hurt more than the hunger ever could. But today was different. Today she could not go back. Finally he spoke, his voice calm but cautious. "You want to clean my house in exchange for food?" he asked, as if confirming that he had heard her correctly. She nodded, her eyes meeting his. "Yes, please, anything. Just something to eat for them," she said, gesturing toward the small children waiting outside, still bundled in their coats. He hesitated again, looking past her to the children. There was a softness in his gaze now, a shift from initial shock to something else. Curiosity, concern, maybe even guilt. He could see the exhaustion etched on her face, the small lines of worry that had been carved by life's hardships. He could hear the desperation in her voice, but it was not pleading. It was honest, raw, and strangely compelling. The moment felt suspended, as if the world had paused to watch this unlikely interaction. She had no idea who he was beyond the obvious. Wealthy, powerful, and completely out of her reach. And yet, she had stood here, risking rejection and humiliation, because her children needed her. She had no other choice. After what felt like an eternity, he stepped back slightly, motioning for her to come inside. "Wait here," he said, still watching her carefully. She hesitated for a moment, overwhelmed by disbelief and gratitude, then stepped through the doorway with her children trailing behind. The interior of the house was breathtaking. Polished floors, elegant furniture, and walls adorned with art she had only ever seen in magazines. It was almost overwhelming, but she kept her focus on the task ahead. Her mind raced. She had no idea what would come next. Would he actually give her food? Would he send her away after seeing her face up close? The uncertainty was painful, but the hope that had flickered in her heart refused to die. She would do anything at all to make sure her children had a meal today. As she followed him through the house, she could feel the weight of their eyes. The children were looking around in awe, their tiny hands gripping her coat. She whispered softly to them, keeping them calm, reminding them to stay quiet. She did not want to ruin this chance, however small it might be. This could be the moment that changed everything, or it could be another disappointment added to a lifetime of struggles. He stopped in the kitchen, motioning for her to sit while he retrieved some food. She could hardly believe it. Simple sandwiches, fruit, and juice, but it felt like a feast. Her children's eyes lit up, their mouths forming shy smiles as they reached for the food. She felt a lump in her throat, swallowing hard to keep from crying. This was more than food. This was a lifeline, a reminder that kindness could exist in unexpected places. As they ate, she couldn't help but glance at him again. He was watching her closely, but his expression had changed. No longer was it just shock. There was curiosity there, and something deeper she could not identify. She ate in silence, careful not to speak too much, letting her children take the first bites. But inside, she wondered, why was he so affected by her presence? Why did it feel like he knew her from somewhere she could not remember? The moment was simple yet profound. In that quiet kitchen, with the hum of the refrigerator and the soft sounds of her children eating, she felt a spark of hope. Perhaps this day would mark the beginning of something new. Perhaps it was the start of a change she had been praying for but never dared to imagine. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, nor the days after that. All she knew was that, for now, they had eaten, and she had dared to ask for help. In that daring act, she had planted a seed that might grow into something life-changing, something that could lift her and her children out of the darkness they had lived in for so long. And as she glanced at the man once more, she felt a strange sense of anticipation. Something about this encounter felt different, as if fate had brought them together at this precise moment. She could not explain it, could not understand it, but she felt it deep in her bones. This was no ordinary day, and this was no ordinary man. She had barely finished her small meal when the man spoke again. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, like he was trying to make sense of something he hadn't expected. "You came here asking for food, and offered to work for it?" he asked. She nodded, keeping her eyes steady. "Yes," she said softly. "I don't have money. I just want to make sure my children eat today." He studied her for a long moment, the silence stretching between them. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, full of questions that neither of them had yet asked. She could feel his gaze, and though it made her nervous, she didn't look away. There was something in his eyes that told her he wasn't just seeing a desperate mother. He was seeing someone he thought he might know, someone from long ago. Her children, now more comfortable, were whispering to each other and giggling softly, trying not to draw attention. She smiled faintly at them, proud of their bravery even in hardship. She turned her attention back to the man, and for the first time, she noticed the fine lines on his face, the slight gray at his temples, the way his eyes held a mixture of surprise and something else she couldn't place. He looked powerful, wealthy, untouchable. And yet, for reasons she didn't understand, he seemed unsettled by her presence. "I've seen you before," he said suddenly, almost to himself. His words hung in the air, uncertain and hesitant. She blinked at him, surprised. "I don't think so," she replied cautiously. "I mean, I don't know you, sir." Her voice was polite, careful, yet there was a note of curiosity. Why did he seem to recognize her? Was it possible he confused her with someone else? He shook his head slightly, running a hand over his face. "No, I know you. I can't place it yet." He looked at her, as if trying to reach back into the past, searching for a memory that refused to surface. She felt a strange tension, a moment suspended between the ordinary and something extraordinary. She had no idea what he meant, but she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this man would understand, maybe he would see her struggle for what it was, and maybe, just maybe, help. Her hands fidgeted in her lap. She thought about how she had gotten here, the long hours of cleaning, the nights spent worrying about money, and the mornings waking up to hungry children. She had tried to hold her head high, to be proud despite poverty, but moments like this reminded her of how fragile life could be. And yet, she had dared to knock on this door. She had dared to ask for help, even from someone who seemed a world apart. The man finally stepped closer. His eyes softened as he looked at her, scanning her face as if trying to understand something beyond words. You were part of my life before, weren't you?" he asked. She shook her head slowly, confused. "I don't think so," she said again. Her voice was gentle but firm. "I'm just a mother trying to feed her children. That's all." He paused, studying her even more closely. Something about her demeanor, her eyes, the way she carried herself despite her exhaustion, reminded him of someone he had known long ago. Someone who had been kind, brave, and full of life, before circumstances had torn her away. The recognition stirred memories he hadn't thought of in years. A name, a face, a connection, something just beyond reach. She watched him carefully, sensing that this moment was important, though she couldn't understand why. She had lived her life trying not to be noticed, trying to survive quietly, without drawing attention. And yet here, in this grand house, she was seen. Not just seen, but recognized. It was unsettling, and yet, in some strange way, comforting. The man finally gestured for her to follow him through the house. "Come with me," he said. She hesitated, unsure of what he intended, but there was no malice in his tone, only curiosity and perhaps a growing concern. She stood, guiding her children behind her, careful to keep them quiet. As they walked through the luxurious halls, she felt out of place, yet strangely steady. She had faced hardship all her life, and the grandeur around her could not shake her resolve. They entered a room filled with shelves of books and photographs. The walls were lined with pictures of people and places she did not recognize. But the man stopped in front of a particular photograph, and she could see the recognition in his eyes deepen. "It's you," he said softly, almost a whisper. "I remember now." She looked at him, startled. I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm just me." He shook his head, pointing to the photograph. "No, you were there before. Years ago. I remember you. I didn't realize. I never thought." He trailed off, lost in thought. She leaned in, trying to see the picture. It was a snapshot from a long time ago, of a young girl at a small community event, smiling shyly at the camera. She recognized herself immediately. How could she not? That was her, many years ago, before life had been so harsh, before she had become the woman standing here, tired but resilient, with children to care for. Tears welled up in her eyes, though she blinked quickly to hide them. She had not expected this. She had never imagined that asking for food would lead to being recognized, remembered, by someone who seemed untouchable, distant, and powerful. Yet here it was. Fate, chance, or coincidence, it did not matter. What mattered was that he knew her, and that recognition was filled with something more than surprise. There was a softness in his expression, a longing, a regret, and perhaps even an unspoken apology. She swallowed hard, unsure what to say. Words failed her. How could she explain the years of struggle, the sleepless nights, the worry and the hunger? How could she explain the pride she had held on to, even when life had tried to crush it? She could not. She could only stand there, letting him take in her presence, letting the moment unfold. Finally, he spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "I never thought I'd see you here, like this." She blinked, unsure how to respond. I didn't know who else to ask," she admitted. "I need food for my children. I can work for it. That's all I want." Her words were simple, honest, and unpretentious. He nodded slowly, as if understanding more than she could imagine. He could see the truth in her eyes, the raw reality of her situation. And yet, beneath that, he could also see her strength, her determination, her unwillingness to give up despite everything. It was not just desperation he was seeing. It was courage, resilience, and a quiet dignity that refused to be erased by hardship. He gestured for her to sit again. "You will not just get food today," he said finally. "Sit. Tell me everything. I want to understand." She hesitated, but something in his tone encouraged her to speak. She began to explain her life, from the early days of struggle to the present moment of near hopelessness. She told him about her children, about the jobs she had tried, the bills she could not pay, the nights she cried quietly so they would not hear. She told him everything she could, in simple, clear words, without embellishment or exaggeration. As she spoke, he listened intently. Every word, every pause, every small detail mattered to him. He could feel the weight of her life, the constant battle she fought simply to survive. And as he listened, the recognition in his heart grew stronger. This was the same spirit he had known long ago, the same determination, the same fire. Life had taken her down a hard path, but it had not extinguished her light. Her children, sitting quietly beside her, watched the interaction with wide eyes. They did not understand everything, but they could sense the importance of the moment. They had seen their mother struggle for years, and now, here she was, standing tall in a house filled with wealth she had never imagined. And though they did not know what was to come, they could feel a change in the air, a shift in their lives that they could not yet name. Hours passed in conversation. She spoke, he listened, and in the quiet moments between words, they both felt a connection that went beyond recognition. It was more than memory, more than coincidence. It was understanding, empathy, and a shared humanity that bridged the gap between wealth and poverty, past and present, despair and hope. By the time she finished, the man had made a decision. He stood, offering a hand, not just as a gesture of help, but as an acknowledgement of her worth. "You are not just asking for food," he said quietly. "You are asking for a chance. And I think you deserve one." She looked at him, stunned. She had not expected this. She had come seeking only a meal, and instead, she was offered recognition, dignity, and perhaps the beginning of something greater. For the first time in a long time, she felt a spark of hope. Not just for today, but for tomorrow. And though she did not know the road ahead, she knew that this encounter, this recognition, had changed something inside both of them. She had eaten, yet her mind was still racing. The moment of recognition, the shock in his eyes, the photograph. It had left her feeling unsteady, as though she were walking on the edge of a cliff. But despite the confusion, there was a strange sense of safety now, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, someone who could have easily turned her away had seen her, not just as a struggling mother, but as a person who mattered. He watched her carefully, studying her expression. There was a quiet intensity in his gaze, the kind that made her feel both nervous and strangely understood. "I want to help you," he said, his voice firm but gentle. She blinked, startled by the directness. I don't understand," she whispered. "I came for food, that's all. I don't want anything else." He shook his head, a small, rueful smile forming on his lips. "No, that's not enough. You deserve more than just food. I can see it in you. I've seen it before and I can't just let you go back to struggling like this." She hesitated, unsure if she should trust him. People had promised help before, only to leave her disappointed. But there was something in his tone, in the way he looked at her, that made her believe him. Her children, still seated quietly nearby, sensed the shift too. Their tiny faces were full of cautious curiosity, and she reached out to hold their hands, grounding herself. She thought about what it would mean to accept his help. It would change everything. Their home, their meals, their future. But accepting help had never been easy for her. Pride had always been a shield, a way to keep herself steady even when life was harsh. Yet now, the shield felt heavy, and the possibility of hope felt heavier still. I don't know what to say," she admitted softly. I've never had anyone see me like this." He nodded, understanding. "Then don't say anything. Just let me help." Over the next few hours, he began to show her what he could do. He offered food not just for that day, but enough to last the week. He asked her questions about her life, about her children, about what she needed most. She answered honestly, her voice quiet but steady, and for the first time in years, she felt truly listened to. There was no judgment in his eyes, no condescension, just concern and the willingness to help. He made arrangements for her to have groceries delivered regularly. He offered to connect her with people who could help her find better work, not charity work, but opportunities that could give her independence and security. She was hesitant at first. She had learned to rely only on herself, to carry the weight of the world quietly. But he insisted, gently, patiently, reminding her that asking for help did not make her weak. It made her human. As the day went on, she began to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. Relief that she would not have to worry about where her children's next meal would come from. Relief that someone saw her struggle and believed she deserved better. And yet, beneath the relief, there was still fear. Fear that this could all disappear as quickly as it had appeared, that life would return to its harshness without warning. She had learned long ago that hope could be fleeting. He noticed her hesitation. "I know it's hard to believe," he said softly. "I know you've been let down before, but I want you to trust me. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a chance. A real chance to change your life." She looked at him, searching his face for any hint of insincerity, but found none. There was only honesty, and a quiet determination that matched her own. Over the next few days, their interaction grew deeper. He invited her back to his house, not just for meals, but to discuss opportunities, to help her plan for the future. She began to see the possibilities. A stable job, a home where her children could play safely, a life without constant fear of hunger. She was cautious, but a small seed of hope began to take root in her heart. One afternoon, as she cleaned a small corner of the house as she had offered to do, he came over with a folder in his hands. "I've put together some options for you," he said. She looked up, curious and anxious. Inside were contacts for work, suggestions for childcare support, and advice on how to manage finances, simple, practical steps that could help her gain independence. She felt a lump in her throat. She had never imagined someone would go to such lengths for her family, for her future. She began to understand something important. This was not just about food. This was about dignity, respect, and a belief in her ability to rise above her circumstances. She realized that he was not just helping her because he could. He was helping her because he saw something in her that she had long feared was gone, her worth. Days turned into weeks. She began to take the first steps toward change. She reached out to the contacts he had provided, started applying for jobs that matched her skills, and slowly began to feel a sense of control over her life that had been missing for years. Each small step was a victory, a confirmation that her efforts were not in vain. And through it all, he continued to check in, offering guidance, encouragement, and sometimes just a listening ear. Her children noticed the change too. They saw their mother smile more often, laugh more freely, and speak with a confidence that had been buried under years of struggle. They felt safe in a way they had never felt before. And she felt it too. A fragile, precious sense of hope that she allowed herself to hold on to, even if only a little. One evening, as they sat together eating dinner, a proper meal, not just something to fill the stomach, she looked at him and felt a wave of gratitude she could barely express. "I don't know how to thank you," she said quietly. He smiled, shaking his head. "You don't need to thank me. Just live your life. Take care of your children. That's enough." But she wanted to do more than just survive. She wanted to thrive, to prove that his faith in her was not misplaced. She began to dream again. Dreams she had buried under years of hardship. Dreams of stability, of education for her children, of a life where fear and hunger were not constant companions. And with each passing day, she felt those dreams inch closer to reality. He too began to notice a change in her, a resilience that inspired him. He had seen many people in need, many who came asking for help, but few had the courage, humility, and determination she possessed. She reminded him of what truly mattered: human connection, empathy, and the quiet strength that could exist even in the harshest circumstances. Their bond grew quietly but steadily. It was not about dependence, but about support and mutual respect. She learned to accept help without feeling shame, and he learned the value of seeing the person behind the struggle. Together, they navigated a path that neither had expected, a path that promised change, hope, and a future that once seemed impossible. And as the days passed, she began to see a life she had never dared to imagine. A life where her children could grow up safe, where she could work without fear, where meals were not a constant worry, and where hope was not a fragile luxury but a living, breathing reality. It was not magic. It was not sudden. It was hard work, patience, and the rare intersection of courage and kindness. And though she knew the journey ahead would not be easy, she also knew that for the first time in her life, she was not walking it alone. The house that had once seemed intimidating and unapproachable became a place of possibility. And the man who had once frozen at the sight of her became a guide, a mentor, and an unexpected ally in a life she had never thought could be hers. She still had moments of doubt, moments when the weight of the past threatened to pull her back. But each time, she remembered the look in his eyes when he first recognized her. The recognition that told her she was seen, valued, and worthy. That memory became a source of strength, a reminder that she could overcome, endure, and transform her life. And though the world outside continued its rush, indifferent and unyielding, inside that home, a quiet miracle was taking place. A mother, once desperate and hungry, was finding her footing. Her children, once unsure and anxious, were learning what hope felt like. And a man, once detached and distant, was discovering the power of seeing, truly seeing, the humanity in another person. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe in something beyond survival. She allowed herself to hope for a future where she could not just provide for her children, but nurture them, guide them, and watch them flourish. And with that hope came a quiet determination to never give up, to seize every opportunity, and to honor the rare kindness that had intersected with her life at the exact moment it was needed most. Life began to change slowly, almost imperceptibly, but every small step made a world of difference. She woke up each morning to the sound of her children's laughter instead of crying. She still had moments of doubt, of fear that the relief she felt would vanish overnight, but those moments were fading. For the first time in years, she felt she could breathe. There was a weight lifted, a burden eased, even if only slightly. The billionaire had been true to his word. He had arranged for groceries to arrive at their apartment each week, enough to feed her children without worry. But it was more than just food. He connected her with people who could help her find stable work, people who believed in her abilities and her determination. He even helped her find a small, safe place for her children to spend their afternoons, giving her the chance to focus on building a future. The first job opportunity was not glamorous, but it was honest work, and it came with a steady income. She arrived on her first day with a mix of nervousness and hope. She wanted to prove herself not just to the people who had offered her the chance, but to herself. For years, she had survived on scraps, working odd jobs, never feeling secure. Now she had a chance to build something real. She was determined not to waste it. Her children adjusted as well. They were still young, still learning the rhythms of a life without constant fear, but they began to thrive in ways she had only dreamed of. They laughed freely, played without anxiety, and even started to talk about small dreams, school projects, hobbies, and friendships. Watching them, she felt a warmth she had long missed, a sense of accomplishment that was about more than surviving. It was about living. The billionaire continued to guide her, offering advice but never taking over. He taught her about budgeting, time management, and how to navigate opportunities that might have seemed out of reach before. He was patient, never condescending, and always attentive to her questions and concerns. Slowly, she began to see herself not as a person trapped in hardship, but as someone capable of creating a life with purpose and stability. One afternoon, she was at her new job when she received a call from him. "How's it going?" he asked, his voice warm. She paused, then smiled, feeling a strange mixture of pride and relief. "It's going well," she said. "I think I can manage this. The kids are happy, and I feel like I can finally breathe a little." There was a pause on the other end. "Good," he said finally. "That's what I wanted to hear. Keep going. You're doing better than you think." Evenings became easier. She had time to sit with her children, help them with homework, and tell them stories without the constant gnawing worry about money or food. She still had bills to pay and responsibilities to manage, but for the first time, she felt in control rather than being controlled by circumstance. Every small victory mattered. A dinner prepared without stress, a bedtime story told without rushing, a smile shared without hesitation. Her confidence began to grow. She started speaking up in ways she had avoided for years, asking questions, offering ideas, and planning for her future. She began to envision a life that was not defined by scarcity, but by possibility. The more she learned, the more she realized that her abilities had never disappeared. They had simply been buried under the weight of necessity and survival. Now she could nurture them, use them, and expand them. Her relationship with the billionaire evolved as well. It was not one of dependency or charity. It was a partnership of sorts, built on respect and trust. He was impressed by her determination and resilience, and she valued his guidance without feeling inferior. There was a mutual understanding. He offered opportunities, and she seized them with every ounce of effort she had. It was a delicate balance, but one that worked beautifully. She began to set small goals for herself. First, to save a little money each month. Then, to secure permanent housing, a place where her children could feel safe and free. She even dreamed of education for them, something she had feared might be out of reach. Each goal achieved brought a sense of accomplishment and reinforced her belief that change was possible. The community around her began to notice the transformation as well. Neighbors who had once seen her struggling now saw her standing tall, speaking confidently, and managing her life with purpose. People began to offer small opportunities, not knowing the backstory, simply recognizing her dedication and work ethic. Each step forward became a chain reaction, each small success paving the way for the next. One day, she returned home to find a small package on her doorstep. Inside was a note from the billionaire and a gift for her children, a set of books, puzzles, and small toys. The note simply said, "For you, keep dreaming." Her heart swelled as she looked at her children's faces lighting up with joy. It was a simple gesture, but it carried a message she had never forgotten. Someone believed in her, in them, and in the possibility of a better life. She reflected on the journey so far. Just weeks ago, she had stood at the gates of a grand house, asking for food in a voice trembling with desperation. Now, she had steady work, a routine that provided stability, and a support system she had never imagined. It was surreal, yet it was real, and she cherished every moment. She had learned that courage, humility, and persistence could intersect with kindness in ways that changed everything. Her children's laughter became the soundtrack of her days. She watched them grow, learn, and play, and she felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. Every small step she took was for them, every effort a gift of hope. She had always wanted to provide for them, but now she could provide not just survival, but a life rich with experiences, learning, and love. She also began to understand the value of giving back in her own way. Though her resources were limited, she started helping neighbors when she could, offering advice, encouragement, or simply a listening ear. She realized that the support she had received was not just about money or opportunity, but about recognition, respect, and care. She wanted to pass that forward in whatever ways she could. The billionaire continued to guide her subtly, offering opportunities that matched her growing skills. He encouraged her to attend workshops, learn new skills, and expand her knowledge. She embraced each suggestion with enthusiasm, feeling empowered by the realization that her life was no longer dictated by circumstance alone. She had agency, and that agency was becoming her strongest tool. Months passed, and with each passing day, she felt more grounded, more capable, and more confident. She had built a rhythm to her life that balanced work, family, and self-care. She no longer feared the next day with the same intensity she had before. She had resources, guidance, and a plan. And most importantly, she had the unwavering determination that had brought her this far. Her children began to flourish in school, excelling in ways she had never expected. Teachers commented on their curiosity, intelligence, and eagerness to learn. She watched them with pride, feeling the weight of years of struggle lift, replaced by hope for the future. She realized that stability was not just about survival, it was about nurturing growth, confidence, and dreams. She also noticed a change within herself. The constant anxiety and fear that had once dominated her thoughts were replaced by a quiet confidence. She still faced challenges, but she approached them with a mindset of problem-solving rather than panic. She had learned resilience, resourcefulness, and the value of seeking help when necessary. And in that learning, she had discovered a sense of peace she had thought was lost forever. One evening, as she sat with her children after a full meal and a day of accomplishments, she reflected on the journey. She thought about the knock at the billionaire's door, the meal he had offered, and the recognition that had followed. That moment had been the turning point, the spark that ignited a series of changes that now shaped every aspect of her life. She realized that courage, even in its smallest form, could intersect with kindness to create extraordinary results. She looked at her children, their eyes bright with curiosity and energy, and felt a surge of gratitude. Life was no longer a daily struggle. It was a journey filled with possibilities. She knew there would still be obstacles, but she also knew that she was no longer facing them alone. She had learned that asking for help did not diminish her strength. It amplified it, opening doors that she had once believed were closed forever. And as she looked toward the future, she allowed herself to dream bigger than ever before. She imagined a home where her children could grow safely, a life where she could work with purpose, and a future where hope was no longer fragile, but constant. Every small victory had built upon the last, creating a foundation strong enough to support dreams she had once thought impossible. She realized that her life had been transformed not by luck alone, but by the intersection of courage, perseverance, and genuine kindness. And in that realization, she found a deep sense of peace, knowing that she could face whatever came next with strength, dignity, and hope. Life had changed in ways she had never imagined. The small victories of the past months had grown into a rhythm of stability, confidence, and purpose. She woke each morning no longer with fear and dread, but with hope and determination. Her children were thriving, their laughter filling their small apartment, and she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. She had continued to work steadily, gaining experience and skill in her job. What had started as a simple way to earn food and basic necessities had grown into something meaningful. She was learning, contributing, and gaining the independence she had always dreamed of. The billionaire's support had opened doors, but it was her courage and determination that had allowed her to walk through them. Her children's lives had transformed alongside hers. They were doing well in school, their curiosity and enthusiasm encouraged rather than stifled by poverty. They had friends, hobbies, and a sense of safety that she had never been able to provide before. Watching them grow, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Not the kind that came from money or success, but the kind that came from knowing she had given her children a foundation to thrive. One day, she received an unexpected call from the billionaire. His voice was warm and familiar, but there was an excitement in it she hadn't heard before. "I have an opportunity for you," he said. She felt a rush of anticipation and a little nervousness. "I think it's something that could change your life even further," he added. She listened carefully as he explained the offer. A chance to participate in a training program that would teach her skills in management, organization, and leadership. It was more than a job, it was a way to build a career and a future. She hesitated, thinking about the responsibilities she already carried. Could she manage this? Would it take time away from her children? But then she looked at them playing nearby, and she realized that the very thing she wanted for them, the chance to grow, learn, and have opportunities, was something she also deserved. She agreed, knowing that this was the next step in her journey. The training was challenging, but she approached it with the same determination that had carried her through years of struggle. Every lesson, every task, every bit of knowledge she gained became a tool she could use to improve her life. She learned quickly, adapting to new ideas, and finding ways to apply them not just to her work, but to managing her home, her children, and her daily life. Her confidence grew with each success. Tasks that had once seemed impossible now became manageable. She discovered strengths she had never fully recognized, and each day she felt more capable and more resilient. The billionaire continued to guide her, offering advice and encouragement, but he allowed her to lead her own path. He had shown her the way, but it was her effort that made the difference. As the weeks passed, she began to see tangible results. She was earning more, managing her household more effectively, and her children were excelling in school. She had created routines, systems, and habits that allowed her life to run smoothly. No longer was she reacting to crises. She was planning, anticipating, and taking charge. It was a new feeling, exhilarating and deeply empowering. The community around her began to notice the change. Neighbors, friends, and even colleagues remarked on her confidence, her poise, and her ability to handle challenges with grace. She had become a quiet inspiration, someone who had overcome adversity through hard work, courage, and determination. People sought her advice, admired her resilience, and respected her journey. She realized that her story could be more than her own. It could inspire others to believe in themselves. One afternoon, she received a visit from the billionaire. He had brought her children small gifts, books, games, and art supplies, and they beamed with joy. Watching them, she felt a surge of gratitude. This man, who had once frozen at the sight of her struggle, had become a guiding presence in their lives. And yet, it was not about dependency. It was about connection, opportunity, and belief in human potential. He spoke to her privately for a moment. "You've done more than I could have expected," he said. Not just for yourself, but for your children. You've shown strength, courage, and integrity. That's why I wanted to offer this next step. I believe in you." She felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming mix of gratitude and pride. She had never been told she was capable in this way before. She had survived, yes, but now she was thriving. She began to think about her future in ways she never had. She imagined a life where her children could pursue their dreams without limitation, where she could continue to grow professionally, and where she could give back to others facing struggles like hers. She understood that success was not just about money or comfort. It was about freedom, choice, and the ability to create opportunities for herself and those she loved. Over time, she started to help others in her community. She shared what she had learned, offered guidance, and mentored other parents struggling to provide for their families. She discovered that giving back was not just a way to repay kindness. It was a source of fulfillment and purpose. The small acts of support she provided had a ripple effect, touching lives she would never fully know but inspiring confidence, hope, and resilience. Her children flourished as she flourished. They grew up in a stable environment where education and curiosity were valued. They developed confidence, social skills, and a sense of security. She watched them with pride, realizing that the struggles of the past had shaped them, but had not defined them. They were learning to dream big, and she had given them the foundation to do so. She also reflected on her own growth. The person who had once stood outside a mansion, asking for food with trembling courage, had transformed into someone capable, strong, and respected. She had learned to accept help without shame, to trust in human kindness, and to act with determination and dignity. Her life had changed not because of luck alone, but because of the choices she had made, the effort she had put in, and the guidance she had been given. One evening, she sat with her children around a dinner table filled with home-cooked food. They laughed, shared stories from school, and played games after the meal. She looked at them and felt a deep sense of contentment. She had faced the worst of life's challenges, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more capable. She realized that true transformation came not from escaping hardship alone, but from embracing every opportunity to grow, learn, and build a better future. The billionaire's support remained a guiding force, but it was clear that she had taken control of her life. She managed her finances, planned her children's education, and continued to develop professionally. The tools and knowledge he had offered were valuable, but it was her persistence, courage, and resilience that had made them effective. She understood now that transformation was not something that could be given. It had to be earned, nurtured, and embraced. Her story began to inspire others outside her immediate circle. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers who heard about her journey were encouraged to believe that change was possible, even in the face of adversity. She became a quiet symbol of hope, proof that courage and determination, combined with the kindness of others, could create lasting transformation. She never forgot the moment she first knocked on the mansion door. The fear, the desperation, and the trembling voice that asked simply for food had been the start of everything. That small act of courage had led to opportunities, guidance, and ultimately, a life she could have only dreamed of before. It reminded her that sometimes, the smallest acts could set off the largest changes. Her children grew more confident with each passing day. They took on challenges with curiosity rather than fear. They dreamed big, and she nurtured those dreams, providing encouragement, guidance, and love. She realized that the foundation she had built for them was strong, and that their future was no longer constrained by scarcity or fear. The bond with the billionaire also remained important. It was not a relationship of dependency, but one of mutual respect and understanding. He had seen her potential when others had not, and she had embraced that belief, using it to transform her life. Their connection became a reminder that human kindness, recognition, and support could create life-changing opportunities. Years later, she could look back and see how far she had come. From the mother who had once trembled at the door of a mansion, asking for food, to a woman who had transformed her life, provided for her children, and inspired others. Her journey was a testament to resilience, courage, and the unexpected ways lives can intersect. Her story became a living example of hope. It reminded people that even in moments of despair, opportunities could arise, that human kindness mattered, and that the strength to change one's life often lay within, waiting for the right moment to be discovered. She had found that strength, nurtured it, and used it to build a life full of promise and possibility. And as she sat with her children, sharing stories, meals, and laughter, she realized that the journey had been worth every hardship. The struggles had shaped her, the courage had sustained her, and the support had opened doors she had once thought were closed forever. Her life had been transformed not by chance alone, but by a combination of determination, resilience, and the belief that even the smallest acts could lead to extraordinary change. In the end, she understood something profound. Life would always bring challenges, but with courage, hope, and human kindness, it was possible to rise above them. She had lived it, felt it, and now she could share it, not just with her children, but with the world. And in that sharing, she found the greatest reward of all, the knowledge that her life, once full of fear and uncertainty, had become a story of transformation, inspiration, and enduring hope.